Hello and welcome back to my channel. This is the second video in a series on growing woodies for your cut flower farm. My name is Ruth Ann. I'm from Abundant Blooms Flower Farm in West Michigan. I am going into my 6th year of growing flowers. I sell primarily to florists, and the purpose of this channel is to look at a flower farm through that lens of selling flowers to florists. And today we are talking about part 2 in a series on selling woodies. And last time I talked about why I grow woodies and how I got started on that journey and planted them in the first planting. So check that video out. I'll put a link in the description to that. Otherwise, please subscribe to my channel. It really encourages me and helps me. And download those free tips for selling flowers to florists so that you can confidently sell flowers to florists as well. Now, getting started with today's video. Today, I am going to talk about the woodies that I planted in the first planting, which was in August of 2022. Again, if you want to learn more details about that, go to the last video I did in the first part of this series. So I am going to go specifically into each one of those. I am going to talk about how they're doing after 2 seasons, how much I've been able to harvest off of them, if at all, and when to harvest them, pruning, how I fertilize them, post-harvest care, vase life, and a few other things mixed in. So just to get started right off the bat, this is not in a particular order, just FYI. The first one I'm going to talk about is smokebush. So the smokebush that I planted was the Winecraft Black, which is like the purple smokebush. I planted 16 of those in August of 2022. Just a few notes about smokebush. They grow really fast. They don't have a lot of pest issues, so the leaves stay nice. They don't get eaten by Japanese beetles typically, or different anything, like that. They're mostly pest free, which is great. And they're called smokebush because of the plumes they get at the tips of their stems, which is technically their flower. And that is actually blooms on 2nd year wood. Typically, most varieties, it blooms on 2nd year wood. The variety that I have, the Winecraft Black, it blooms on 2nd year wood. So you can sell it for the plume, or you can just sell it for the foliage, which to this point, that is mostly what I have done, is sold it for just the foliage without the plume, because I get a pretty good price for stem for them, and I've been able to sell them all. So I guess if I wasn't able to sell them, I would leave them on the plant to bloom the following year. But since I've been able to sell them all, I just sell them all. Plus, you can't sell the plume for twice the amount of the foliage. So it's kind of a tricky thing to not sell it if you're able to try and wait for the plume. I do have florists that are begging me for the smoke. But like I said, I just have been able to sell it all. So that's what I've done so far. I am getting a new smokebush. Well, it's not new, but it's newly available in the United States. It's from Farmer Bailey. They're sold out. Sorry, unless they add more, I don't think you can get them anymore. But he is importing smokebush from the Netherlands that blooms on 1st year wood. So it gets smoke on the 1st year wood. So I have 30 of those coming this spring. Yeah, this spring, 2025. So anyway, back to the smokebush that I planted in 2022. So how are they doing? They're doing pretty good. I've had 1 or 2 of the 16 plants experience what I've heard other flower farmers call sudden death syndrome. It's like the plant looks really great and it starts to grow, and then it literally just all dies and all the leaves fall off. It's from a soil-borne, from what I've gathered, it's from a soil-borne thing that just kind of happens. I was talking with a couple of flower farmers at the AFCFG conference I went to this fall, or this late summer. I was talking with Carl from Green Park Nursery, who has all he grows is woodies, and also Drew. It was at Clara Joyce. And Drew was talking about how that happens to some of his smokebush, and we were walking through his fields, and I saw it in his field too. So I don't think it really spreads, and they say it typically comes back. So I have lost 1, I think for sure 1, I'm not sure, I think maybe 2 of them definitely experienced that this past summer. So we'll see how they go, but otherwise they've done really great. So they're a very fast growing shrub. So my first summer, remember I planted them in August of 2022. My first summer I sold 8 bunches, and that was all that it produced, and I was able to sell them all. So that was about 3 to 4 stems per plant. So it doesn't really produce a whole lot the first year, but it did produce a little bit, which is kind of nice because the shrubs were about $100 per per tray. So it almost paid for itself in the first year, like if you're kind of looking at it from that aspect. But then in 2024, I sold 27 bunches, which was all of it. I sold my entire crop. And actually some of it had started to rebloom, like to regrow. And in the fall, I was selling some regrowth. Some of them I sold for a little bit cheaper, but so that was interesting. So that's a significant increase. So off of 15 plants, I got 270 stems off the second year. So I just think that's really interesting. Moving on, so to prune them in late winter or very early spring, like February, March timeframe, you pretty much cut them down to 18 inches. That allows them to grow straight, tall stems every year. So it's all new growth. And the new growth has the deeper purple, like the more desirable, vibrant color. So yeah, so I fertilize them in late winter. Or I'm sorry, I prune them in late winter, and then I fertilize them twice. I fertilize them in early spring, like May, and then again in the end of July. And I just use a granular like shrub fertilizer that I get locally. You want to keep them watered when they're young. So the first season I watered them pretty good, and then I didn't water them much in 2024. And we had a very significant drought, and my smokebush did great. Not so much on the 9-bark, more on that to come. Okay, so when to harvest them, they're pretty, you have to wait until the stems are woody and mature. Otherwise, if you don't, the tips will just simply collapse. They will simply wilt. Like mid-July is kind of the time frame for the 9-bark post-harvest. So they can wilt, so you do want to harvest them early in the morning. You want to harvest them first thing, and you can put hydrator in them. I don't always, in fact, if they're mature, especially later in the season, you don't, but if you're like mid-July and they're just starting to be mature enough, I would definitely put a splash of hydrator in the water when you harvest them, and then put them in the cooler overnight, and then they're usually like rock solid. Like, they're great. I have found them post-harvest wise, I have found them more forgiving than 9-bark, which is next on the list. Anything that I missed? Oh, I planted them 2 feet apart. I don't think I mentioned that. All of my shrubs were planted either 18 inches or 2 feet apart, which is super close. If you are from the landscape world, yes, that is super, super close planting, but every year you're essentially shearing them off and they're regrowing, and you're growing an upright plant. You're not growing this big bushy shrub. You're growing them very tight. Okay. 9-bark, number 2, like I said, not in any order, but the second one I'm going to talk about is 9-bark. I planted these at 18 inches apart, and I planted 3 varieties of 9-bark. I planted Tiny Wine, which I'll put a picture up, of course, but it's a small, like lighter chartreusey green color. The leaf is small, and the whole shrub is small, like maybe up to my knees or a little taller than that. So it's a pretty small, compact shrub, and it is so productive. My first season with it, 2023, again, planted in August 2022, there were so many stems off of these like brand new shrubs. It was incredible, and I sold tons of them. And the florist really liked them. I mean, the one florist was like, we love it, it's so great for our funerals. And last summer I had a florist order 6 bunches for a wedding. Yeah, later that day she called me and was like, can I get 6 more bunches of this? She really liked it. So it is really desirable. The florists really do like it. Because it's so productive and smaller, I don't charge as much for it. I think I charge $1 a stem. Be aware, like, not all 9-barks are charged the same for that. So the next 9-bark I planted is called Summer Wine 9-bark. That, I believe, is the darkest 9-bark on the market. It has a much larger leaf, but kind of a medium-sized leaf, and it's very fast growing, and it's huge. It's over my head. Enormous. The next one is Ginger Wine. Ginger Wine, like the name suggests, is more of a ginger color. It's great for the fall. It's a great fall plant. It has the largest leaf, and it's enormous, like huge and tall. It grows from 18 inches to well over 6 feet. It's great. The florists love them. They love them all. I sold out of them all in my first season in 2023. So here's the thing, and that really sold me on the Woodies, was the 9-bark. So in 2023, I sold over $1,000 of 9-bark, and I was like, I paid for my entire woody investment off of three different shrubs, all 9bark, off of all the 9bark, which again was three of the, a third of it, almost a third of what I bought. And I paid for my whole investment. I was like, there's something to these. I'm back. I had to go get a hat and some water, and as I was in the house, my daughter gave me these. These are for our hoop house. New art. All right. Where's my notebook? Back again. Got my notebook and some tea. I did have to cover my hoops over there. It's getting a little colder in here. But back to where we were. 9bark. So, yeah, the first season, 2023, I sold over $1,000 of 9bark, and I basically sold everything I had, particularly the dark ginger wine and summer wine. I sold it all. So 2024 was slightly disappointing in my 9bark sales. So the first season I sold over $1,000, like just over $1,000, and then 2024 I only sold $900. Why? What happened? So I actually sold more of the tiny wine 9bark, the small chartreuse green one. But we had one of the worst droughts ever in the middle to late season, in the late summer, I should say, in 2024. And I had my 9bark hooked up to drip line with emitters, and I thought that they were working, but it's really hard to tell because the shrubs are enormous. They were huge. You can't really tell what's happening at the base of them because they're so big. And right as I was ready to start harvesting them, or I had already harvested some of them, but all of a sudden, literally overnight, they all turned brown around the edges. I'll put a picture on, and I think it's from the drought, and so I couldn't sell them. I mean, I had one florist that had ordered, like, I don't know, 8 bunches of it for a wedding or something, and I was like, oh, this, like, I can't get enough good ones. I'm not going to be able to, complete your order. And she actually was like, oh, that actually looks fine. I'm putting them, up in an arch. They're not going to really be seen. But then I had another florist who she had ordered this 9bark weeks in advance. And I was like, oh yeah, I'll have it because, I have it in the fall. I was like, I actually brought it to her a couple weeks ahead of time. I was like, look at what this 9bark's doing. I can't sell it, like it's not going to work. And she was like, yeah, they're supposed to go in centerpieces. So, that was really disappointing. I almost didn't have any of my 9bark crop, my dark 9barks. So that's what happened in 2024. But you're always learning. So you're like, okay, well, apparently they need more water, or at least when they're this young. So there's snow falling off the hoop. When they're this young, they need more water. So that was pretty disappointing. But in general, 9bark is pretty good. Like, it's not prone to pests. So, like, Japanese beetles don't eat the leaves and different things. So usually it's a pretty good crop. So for harvest wise, again, like the smokebush, you have to wait until the tips are woody enough. And you say, well, how do you know that? Well, I pretty much don't attempt to even harvest them before the middle of July, preferably even late July. The tiny wine 9bark seems to mature faster, but even with that, the more mature they are, just the better they do. Again, otherwise their tips wilt. I always do a test because it does, like, and for you might live in a warmer climate and your 9bark starts growing sooner than mine. So you might be earlier than me. So this is how you figure it out. When you think it's ready, you cut, 5 or 7 stems and you bring them inside your house and you put them on your counter and you see what they do. 9bark has actually a pretty long vase life, like 7 days. So, or longer. So that's what I do. And I literally do this every year because I don't want to sell 9bark that's gonna crash. So I harvest it, I bring it in my house, and I wait and see what it does. Typically those darker the darker summer wine and ginger wine don't really sell till late August and September anyway, because of their colors. So that works out great. To prune, okay, post-harvest, sorry. 9bark's a little fussier than smokebush, remember? I harvest this in the morning, I put it in hydrator, and I get it in my cooler, and I keep it in my cooler for at least 24 hours before I sell it, or, sell it the next day. You do that, they do pretty well, but don't try and harvest this in the middle of the day. it doesn't work. Definitely hydrator helps. So to prune, I prune it in late winter, the same as the smokebush, and I do it to about 18 inches, and then they regrow from there every year. Fertilizer is the same. Whoa, my thing just started giving me a thumbs up. For fertilizer, it's the same. It's the same regimen, twice, early spring and late midsummer. Okay, the next plant that I'm going to talk about is the hydrangea. So if you remember from the last video, I planted, in my 2022 planting, I planted 16 Invincible 2 Spirit hydrangeas. But my very first like little woody planting was when I bought retail limelight and lace cap hydrangeas. And I can't even remember, 2019, like before I even started farming, with the goal that they would be for my farm. So I have 3 varieties or 4 varieties of hydrangeas, and they're all treated a little differently. So you gotta kind of know what they are. And it's helpful to have different varieties because you can get earlier blooming ones and more later ones. And they can all be useful. And spoiler alert, this is coming in the next video, everything I planted in 2024, but I planted over 100 hydrangeas, over 100 more hydrangeas in 2024, lots of multiple different varieties. So I like hydrangeas, and so do florists. So I like them because they sell. Depending on the hydrangea, because different hydrangeas are different sizes, they're planted between 18 inches and 24 inches. The bigger limelights are 24. And you harvest them when the florets are fully open, like the top of the flowers. You really want that whole cap to be open. There's snowflakes falling on me because my vent is open and it's snowing. So you want that whole cap to really be open or very, very, very close to opening. Otherwise, it will just really wilt and crash. I always harvest these first thing in the morning, and I always harvest them into hydrator. And I get them immediately in my cooler. I literally harvest them into hydrator and I put them in my cooler right away. So as for like the limelights and the lace caps, like there's no exception. That has to happen, or they are prone to wilting, or they're gonna crash and they're gonna wilt on you. So some hydrangeas are harvested dry. So the Invincible Spirit, I'll put a picture of them up, but they're really a pretty pink, but they are very prone to wilting when they're that pink color, but they dry into this green, which is really great and really a better product and a better seller. And then they last a really long time in the vase, and they're not fussy about being hydrated and different things. So it kind of depends on what you want them to look like. You can also harvest the limelights and the lace caps in a more antiqued look, and I do, and I can. However, mine are not under shade cloth and they get brown spots on them, and some of my florists don't like that at all. Some of it love them and they want them for weddings and they take tons of them. So again, it's about really clearly communicating what they look like, because they're going to change throughout the season. So your florist that ordered the hydrangea from you 3 weeks ago when it was all white, and now it's antiqued into pink, and you're selling it as a limelight hydrangea, they've got to know what it looks like. And I had this season, exact scenario. The florist had ordered the limelights a couple weeks before, and she ordered them again, and I had on it that it was antiqued in pink, and I had a picture of it, and I texted her. I was like, this is what they look like, I just want to make sure this is what you want. And she said, oh no, I need them white. So like I tried to communicate, and I just like double verified, and that's not what she wanted. So just over communicate. I sold a lot of them. Okay, so the first year that I had them, 2023, I didn't sell any of the Invincible Spirit. They're just too small. So they definitely took 2 years to mature. And then this past season in 2024, I had tons of them. I didn't sell them all. I had a lot of them. They really produced beautifully. I'll put pictures up. So I definitely would say hydrangeas take at least 2 years to get stems that you can sell, and then after that they keep getting more and more, and they really keep producing more and more stems, and they are a really great plant. From one limelight hydrangea, a mature 5-7 year old limelight, you can be cutting 50 stems, and you're selling them for like $250 a stem. I mean, they're pretty much rock stars. Also, They seem to be trending right now. In speaking with my florists, they're talking about lots of white, particularly white hydrangeas. So they definitely seem to be kind of hot right now. Of course, floral trends change, but right now they seem to be a great investment, a great thing to have on your farm. The only other thing, to prune hydrangeas are not quite as straightforward. I usually prune mine about 24 inches, like knee height. When you prune them smaller, how, depending on how you prune them, depends on how, if they're going to get really big and like huge mop heads, or if they get smaller heads. So if you prune them really short, they're going to send up really long, tall stems and get really big heads. So if you want a smaller head, prune them so they're not like more like 24 or 30 inches. Don't prune them quite so small. Okay, moving on to the next plant, which is which in my planting is Symphocarpus or snowberry. Just to run down the facts, I plant them 18 inches apart. I prune them to 12 inches. You prune them hard, and they grow so pretty much almost from the ground up. From that 12 inches, they grow to easily be they like come past my waist, 3 to 4 feet tall when they're mature, especially, and they grow really tall straight stems. If you don't prune them to 12 inches, they're going to send up more thinner, branchier, not as long and tall and straight and, you know, big stems. So you really want to prune them correctly. So prune them to 12 inches, or like 8 to 12, like prune them pretty short. So the very first season that I had the snowberry, which I have the coralberry snowberry from Spring Meadow, I was like amazed, shocked. They grew so big and tall and like voluptuous, and they were beautiful. And so the variety I have from Spring Meadow was pink. There's other varieties. They were so beautiful the first season. So in 2023, my first season, I sold 18 bunches of them. So 16 plants. So it's almost 12 stems a plant. So I mean, that's a lot, I thought, from 16 plants to have 180 stems to sell. And then in 2024, you learn as you go. Man, spring of 2024, I was like, oh man, you know, you're just like almost in tears. I was so upset because I don't pay a lot of attention to my woodies all the time in the spring. This is spring and they're growing like mad. I don't know. I'll find the picture and put the date up. But I was thinking, these don't quite look right. And the woodies are kind of by themselves. Like they're off away from my annuals, and I'm not harvesting anything off these woodies, right? So like, it's not like I see them and inspect them really carefully. Yeah, but you should. So they were full of caterpillars, and the caterpillars were destroying them. Spring of 2024. I pulled all the caterpillars off and fed them to my chickens. I'll put a really gross picture up. And I was like, I lost my whole crop. I mean, like, I'm not going to have anything. And the crop was definitely affected by it, but I did still have sellable stems. And some of the plants weren't as affected. It was like the caterpillars started up, you know, this part of the row, and then you go down. So you know, word to the wise, make sure that you're looking at your plants. I for sure will be checking my snowberries more carefully in the future. But all that to be said, even with the damage, I sold 32 bunches, 320 stems of Symphocarpus or of snowberries from that 16 plants, from those 16 plants. I also, in 2023, I added some woodies from Farmer Bailey. He started offering some woody shrubs, which is great. It's really helpful. He has stuff that Spring Meadow doesn't have. He has really great information and growing guides that are really helpful, and he's bringing in imports from the Netherlands and other places that are really hard to get here in the United States. So some of these woodies that I have are like not even available in the United States otherwise. So I got a bunch of snowberries from him in 2023, in the spring of 23. So that was mostly what I bought from him. I think I got 30 or 40 snowberries. So I got white ones, and I got like a different pink one. So basically the snowberries are mid, early, and late, so they can mature at different times. So that's kind of helpful to know. And I'm going to talk about maturity in a minute. But so off of those 30 plants, I sold 80 stems. They well, first of all, they were planted in the spring, as opposed to the first planting of snowberries I planted in the fall. So it's not comparing apples to apples here. And so the snowberries that I planted in the spring of 23 from Farmer Bailey definitely did not produce the same like robust plants the first season as the ones that were planted in the fall. But they still produced some that I was able to sell, and I sold 8 bunches from that new planting of 30 plants, so 80 stems. Not bad, wasn't bad. So harvest, it depends on the variety when they're able to be harvested. And somebody asked me like the harvest window of snowberries, and it depends on the variety, and obviously it depends on your climate. But for me, my Symphocarpus is like late, my coralberry snowberry, the pink, that the original one, is a late August and September planting. And you'll know when they're ready to harvest, because the berries, you're harvesting them for the berries. And they have beautiful foliage actually too. Some people sell them for the foliage, which is kind of reminiscent of eucalyptus foliage and holds really well also. But you also want to be careful on the varieties that you get, because some people don't like snowberries. Some florists don't like snowberries because the foliage gets black spots on it. So that does not happen with these varieties that I'm talking about. These are cut flower varieties, and I've never had the foliage turn black. But some people have experience with other varieties that are not so good. So know what you're buying, and everything I'm talking about doesn't do that. So the berries start green and small, and then they get bigger and bigger and swell to these nice berries, and then they turn whatever color they're going to turn, pink, white, dark pink. So you'll know when they're mature based on that the berries are the right color and they're nice and swollen and mature. And you'll just know by looking at it. Harvest wise, or they're pretty tough. There's not a lot of special treatment. They are definitely a woody, so they benefit from hydrator. I cut them in the morning, put them in the cooler. There's nothing real special about them. And vase life, they have a pretty good vase life. What happens is the berries start to like shrivel. The foliage continues to look good, but I would say they have like a 5-ish to 7 day base life. So how they are with the florists, florists really love them. I mean, really, really like them. Wedding and event florists love the white. I sell the pink though also. So they're very well accepted. And like I said, I sold everything that I could. So the next one I'm going to talk about from the 2022 planting is the lilac. I planted a bloomerang lilac is what it's called, and it's a reblooming lilac, which is really interesting. I wouldn't consider this lilac like the super biggest. It's not have huge blooms, I don't feel like, in the spring. So it's a darker purple, and there's different varieties of it. It is one that I've kind of thought, over the time, is this really gonna hold its own? Just because I feel like in the spring it's just not as big as like the old time lilacs, like the French varieties and other varieties. So I feel like in the spring it's a little wimpy, to be honest. So I'm not sure, but okay, so how did it do? So in 2023 I didn't really get any spring blooms, but it reblooms in August, and I got blooms in August. Not really enough to sell. I don't think I sold any of them. I did cut them and I gave them to some of my florists. Like I gave them like 3 stems. Like, look at this lilac that's blooming. First of all, it's just amazing to have a lilac in August. And they were like, I mean, they were like so excited. The one florist put it like all over her Instagram, like, look what my farmer brought me. Local flowers are so amazing. Who knew that there could be lilacs? I mean, they like just loved them. And so I just had a couple of blooms. Honestly, like I didn't even have a bunch worth. And then they rebloom not at the same time, which is kind of annoying. Like some of them will bloom and they kind of trickle in. So I don't really know how many I'm going to have. Other than the florists think they're absolutely amazing. I've sold everything I could, but so in 2023 I didn't sell any. Like I said, I just gave them away. And then in 2024 I sold 18 bunches. So you know, it was okay. Again, I feel like the verdict is still out on the lilac. Okay, so then the other varieties that I started in 2022 was viburnum, glitters and glows, and spirea wedding cake. So I have 16 of each of those plants. They're all still alive. They look amazing. They are more slow growing. I have not harvested from them at all, so they're definitely a longer term investment. But I'm telling you, everybody wants spirea and everybody wants viburnum. And there's actually lots of different varieties of viburnum and spirea. So you just got to make sure you get the right ones. Although Jenny Love says there's no bad viburnum. She loves them all. But some of them are grown for their spring blooms, and some of them are grown for their berries in the fall. And some of them are grown for either, like the berries or the blooms. So just know that there's different kinds of viburnum and they're grown for different things. So I am hopeful in 2025, after 3 years, that I will be able to harvest off of the viburnum and the spirea. I am not sure about the spirea. I'm not sure. We'll see. But the viburnum, I really think I'll be able to harvest off of them. Again, also to note, both of those bloom on old wood. So you want to make sure that you're aware of that when you're harvesting and different things. I don't really have anything further to say on those, just that they definitely take longer to mature. So I hope you found this interesting. Please let me know in the comments if you have any questions about growing the woodies or other woodies. If I have any advice that I can share, I'm going to try and answer your questions. And I have more videos coming in this series. So the next video is about the great 2024 planting of over 900 shrubs and where I got them from, what I planted, why I planted them. And then, of course, I have no results because I just planted them. So I hope you look forward to that. Please subscribe and then download my free tips for selling flowers to florists. I think you'll find them really helpful. And then you'll be on my newsletter and there's some exciting information that's coming soon. And you're not going to want to miss it. So don't forget to do that and subscribe. And I will be back in a few days with more on this woody topic, which, if you can't tell, I love talking about. See you later.